History is inspiration. History is where we came from. History is a part of us. History is insight, knowledge, important. Just in researching the history of black hair and natural hair, I found so many correlations between how we treat our hair, how we style our hair, how we look at our hair, how we embrace our hair. In something as simple as hair, you find so many connections to the past. A lot of slaves would be given Sundays off for religious reasons, but during that time they would also partake in other activities including fishing and growing their own crops, but also they will use that time to groom and take care of their hair. There's a joke in the natural hair community today that naturals don't really leave their houses on Sundays because Sundays are wash days, and what wash days are days that we dedicate strictly to taking care of our hair, and we do everything from shampooing to conditioning to deep conditioning to detangling to moisturizing and styling our hair, and we spend several hours doing this, which is why we have to literally dedicate like one whole day to this process. During slavery in America, slaves with lighter skin and straighter hair were designated to work in the home rather than the field because their features were translated as European attributes. And because of that, they were favored. And when slavery was abolished, there was still the mentality that kinky, thick hair was unclean, unkempt, and it indicated a lower social status or lower economic class, and it just was not seen as a positive thing. So many African Americans would take to straightening their hair to mirror the features of the white population so that they would have more opportunity. When we fast forward to the 1960s, during the Black Panther movement, we see that several African Americans stopped straightening their hair. Why they were doing that is because they wanted to abandon the practices that were adopted by the Europeans. And so in their wearing afros, they saw strength and they saw empowerment, and they saw a way to reclaim their roots. When we look at time periods like the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s, perms were a thing. Perms were really, really popular. I was one of the people that would make sure I had my perm every 6 months. I was not playing any games, and it was a really, really common thing. And this is no shade to the people who get perms, but we see that there was a trend in removing your kinks in your natural hair. Now, within like the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a complete transformation. Now there's a whole natural hair movement, and we're seeing a lot of young women reclaiming their roots and rocking their natural hair. We have movies like Good Hair, produced by Chris Rock, and so many other documentaries that have really pushed the recent natural hair movement. Slaves were very resourceful. They did not have the same hair materials that they had back when they were in their homeland, so they got creative. Things such as bacon grease and butter were used to moisturize and soften the hair. Kerosene and cornmeal were used to cleanse the scalp, and men used axle grease to slick down their hair. Lye was used to lighten hair, and coffee was used as a natural dye. When we look at black hair today, especially within the natural hair community, we're not exactly using bacon grease, but we are using several things within the home, especially within the kitchen, to treat our hair. A lot of Africans would wear their hair in elaborate hairstyles and adorn their hair in things like beads, rings, and pearls. And in a lot of African cultures, hair meant something more significant. Sometimes it had spiritual indications, economic and social indications. And when the slave trade began, a lot of slave owners would cut off their slaves' hair to strip them of their culture and identity. When we look at today's culture, we see a similarity in the way that we are styling our hair and getting really creative. and it's worth knowing and it's worth sharing.